Glenn Ford's hand hit the grip, cleared leather, and clicked the hammer in .4 seconds flat, and the whole Western Heritage Awards crowd erupted, while John Wayne sat at the bar and didn't even move his glass. Wait, because what the Duke said in the next 3 minutes turned Ford's fastest draw in Hollywood into a philosophy lesson, and half that room still talks about the silence that followed. March 1964. Paramount Studios, Los Angeles. The commissary building's west wing has been converted into an elegant reception hall for the evening ceremony. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across polished wood floors, where Hollywood's greatest Western stars mingle in formal attire. The air carries the scent of expensive cologne, mixed with the leather smell from a dozen gun belts worn over tuxedos. In the eastern corner, 30 feet from the bar, Glenn Ford has cleared a demonstration space, and he's showing off the skill he's been perfecting for 8 years. Ford is 48 years old, 25 years in the business, standout performances in Gilda, The Big Heat, 3:10 to Yuma. He's built a reputation as a serious professional who brings technical precision to every role, but tonight he's not discussing acting technique. He's demonstrating something he believes separates real Western actors from the pretenders: speed. The gun belt around his waist holds a prop Colt .45 specially modified for quick draw competitions. Ford's wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, and the contrast between formal evening wear and frontier weaponry creates an image that's pure Hollywood, the Old West filtered through modern celebrity glamour. The key, Ford explains to the circle of producers and directors surrounding him, is the grip. Most actors grab the gun like they're shaking hands. Wrong. He demonstrates the proper finger position without drawing. Trigger finger along the frame, thumb on the hammer. It's all about muscle memory. Director George Stevens stands closest, holding a stopwatch. Beside him, producer Walter Mirisch leans in with professional interest. Actors Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea complete the circle, listening to Ford break down the mechanics like he's explaining a complex camera movement. Speed is everything in a real gunfight, Ford continues, his voice carrying the confidence of extensive research. History shows us that the fastest gun wins. Wild Bill Hickok, Wyatt Earp. They weren't the most accurate shooters. They were the fastest. Dead accurate doesn't matter if you're already dead. Someone asks for a demonstration. Ford smiles, steps back, and assumes the classic gunfighter stance. Feet shoulder-width apart. Right hand hovering inches above the gun grip. Left hand clear of his body. Every detail is technically perfect, the result of thousands of practice repetitions. Time me, he says. Stevens raises the stopwatch. Ready. Now. Ford's hand moves like lightning. The gun clears leather, rises to hip level. Thumb hits the hammer. The metallic click echoes through the reception hall. The entire sequence happens so fast that several onlookers blink and miss it. Stevens checks the stopwatch, and his eyebrows rise. .4 seconds. The crowd erupts in applause. Ford holsters the weapon with visible satisfaction. Not bad for an old man, he says, grinning. I've done it in .35. That's competition-level speed. Notice something, though. 30 feet away at the bar, John Wayne hasn't moved. He's 57 years old, wearing a dark suit that somehow looks more natural on him than Ford's tailored elegance. Wayne's been nursing the same whiskey for 20 minutes, and he's watched Ford's entire demonstration without changing expression. When the applause dies down, Wayne still doesn't react. He just takes a slow sip from his glass. Ford notices Wayne's attention, or rather, the careful lack of reaction. He walks over, still wearing his gun belt, riding the wave of admiration from the crowd. Duke, Ford says, his voice friendly but carrying an edge of competitive pride. What do you think? Wayne sets his glass down slowly. He doesn't stand. He doesn't smile. He just looks at Ford with those patient eyes that have stared down 100 movie villains. "Impressive, Glenn," Wayne says, his voice carrying that distinctive drawl that can fill a movie theater or quiet a room. "You've put in the work." Ford senses an opening. He's always respected Wayne, but he's never quite understood the mystique that surrounds the man. Ford believes in measurable skills, quantifiable abilities. Wayne's reputation seems based on something Ford finds difficult to grasp, something intangible, almost mythical. 8 years of practice, Ford continues. Worked with the same instructor who trained Hugh O'Brien for the life and legend of Wyatt Earp, Arvo Ojala, best in the business. He says I'm fast enough to have been a real gunfighter in the Old West. Wayne nods thoughtfully. Might be right about that. The conversation has attracted attention from nearby guests. A small crowd begins to drift over, sensing something interesting developing between two masters of the Western genre. Ford asks the question that'll change the entire evening. "What about you, Duke? Ever time your draw?" Wayne considers the question for a long moment. Then he says one word: "No." Ford looks genuinely puzzled. "Really? With all the westerns you've made, all the gunfight scenes, I'd think you'd want to know how fast you are." "Never seemed important," Wayne replies. Listen to this exchange carefully, because Ford's about to learn something that 8 years of technical training never taught him. But speed is everything in a gunfight. Ford insists. The fastest gun wins. That's historical fact. Wayne sets down his whiskey glass and looks directly at Ford. When he speaks, his voice hasn't changed volume, but something about his presence shifts. The small crowd around them has grown larger. People sense that this isn't just casual conversation anymore. This is a lesson being taught by one master to another, and everyone wants to witness it. Ford doubles down on his position. "Absolutely. I've researched this extensively. Wild Bill Hickok, Bat Masterson, Wyatt Earp, they all survived because they were faster than their opponents." Wayne stands slowly. At 6'4", he towers over most of the room. But it's not his physical size that dominates the space. It's the quiet authority he carries, the moral weight that seems to settle on his shoulders like a coat he's worn for 35 years. "Glenn," Wayne says, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. In all your research about famous gunfighters, did you ever come across any who missed their target?" Ford frowns, not understanding where this is going. "Miss? What do you mean?" Wayne continues, his voice patient but firm. "Did any of these fast-draw artists ever lose a gunfight because they drew quick but shot wide?" The crowd is completely focused on Wayne now. Even Ford realizes he's being led somewhere unexpected. "Well, yes," Ford admits slowly. "I suppose some of them missed under pressure." Wayne nods. "See, that's where I think your research might be incomplete. The fastest gun doesn't always win, Glenn. The most accurate gun wins. Speed without accuracy is just movement. Dangerous movement, but just movement." Ford's confidence wavers. This isn't the conversation he expected when he walked over to get a compliment from the Duke. But accuracy doesn't matter if the other guy shoots first. Ford protests. Remember this moment, because Wayne's about to dismantle an assumption that Ford has built an entire skill set around. Wayne's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his posture. He's no longer just participating in a casual conversation. He's teaching a lesson that extends far beyond fast draw technique. "Glenn, what's the most important part of any gunfight?" "Drawing fast," Ford answers immediately. Before that, Ford looks confused. "I don't understand." Wayne's voice drops lower, carrying the authority of 35 years playing men who lived by the gun. "The most important part of any gunfight is not being in one." The room has gone completely quiet. Even the background noise of the reception seems to fade. Wayne continues, and every word carries weight. "Real gunfighters, the ones who lived long enough to become legends, they didn't look for fights. They avoided them when possible. And when they couldn't avoid them, they didn't rely on speed. They relied on being right." Ford starts to respond, but Wayne isn't finished. Wild Bill Hickok didn't survive because he was fast. He survived because he was careful. Wyatt Earp didn't win at the OK Corral because he outdrew the cowboys. He won because he was fighting for law and order against men fighting for chaos. The righteousness of his cause steadied his hand. Wayne walks over to the demonstration area where Ford had been showing off his technique. The crowd parts naturally, understanding that something significant is happening. Ford follows, drawn by Wayne's gravity. "You want to know why I never timed my draw?" Wayne asks. Ford nods, genuinely curious now, his competitive pride temporarily set aside. Wayne looks around the room, making eye contact with directors, producers, fellow actors, men who have made fortunes telling stories about the American West. Because the speed of your draw doesn't matter if you don't know when to draw, and you don't know when to draw unless you understand what's worth fighting for. Wayne's voice fills the reception hall, carrying to every corner despite never rising above conversational level. Every gunfight scene I've ever done, every Western I've ever made, it's not about how fast I can pull a gun, it's about why I'm pulling it. To protect the innocent, to uphold the law, to defend what's right against what's wrong. The gun is just a tool. The man behind it, his principles, his courage, his willingness to sacrifice for others, that's what wins or loses the fight. Stop for a second and picture the room from above. Glenn Ford, one of Hollywood's most accomplished actors, standing in formal wear with a gun belt around his waist, surrounded by the industry's elite, and John Wayne, the undisputed king of Westerns, teaching a philosophy that makes 8 years of technical practice look like missing the point entirely. Ford stares at Wayne, beginning to understand that he's been schooled by a master, not in technique, but in something deeper. Wayne walks back to the bar, picks up his whiskey, and takes a slow sip. The crowd remains where they are, absorbing what they've just heard. The silence stretches for 10 seconds. 15, 20. Finally, Ford speaks, his voice quieter than before. Wayne considers the request. Then he sets down his glass and walks back to Ford. "You still wearing that gun belt?" "Yes." "Mind if I borrow it?" Ford unbuckles the gun belt and hands it to Wayne. There's something symbolic about the gesture, like a student offering his tool to a master for evaluation. Wayne straps the belt around his waist with the casual familiarity of a man who's worn guns in dozens of films. But something is different. This isn't an actor putting on a costume. This is John Wayne accepting the weight of responsibility that comes with carrying a weapon. Wayne positions himself in the demonstration area, but instead of assuming the classic fast draw stance that Ford demonstrated, feet apart, hand hovering, body coiled for explosive speed, Wayne just stands there naturally, relaxed, right hand hanging loose at his side. "George," Wayne calls to director George Stevens. "You still got that stopwatch?" Stevens steps forward, stopwatch ready. "Ready when you are, Duke." Wayne doesn't assume a gunfighter stance, doesn't position his feet or clear his left hand. He simply stands like John Wayne, looking directly at an imaginary opponent with those steady, measuring eyes. "Now," Stevens calls, "watch what happens next, because this is what Ford will remember for the rest of his career." Wayne's movement is nothing like Ford's lightning-quick draw. It's smooth, deliberate, controlled. The gun comes out of the holster like it's being drawn by gravity rather than yanked by speed. Wayne brings it to chest level, not hip level like Ford did, aims down the barrel at an imaginary target, and holds the position steady as a rock. Stevens checks his stopwatch. 0.8 seconds. Twice as slow as Ford's best time. But nobody in the room is thinking about speed anymore. They're looking at Wayne's stance, his control, the unwavering steadiness of his aim. If this were a real gunfight, Ford might have cleared leather first, but Wayne's gun is pointed exactly where he wants it, steady enough to hit a specific button on a man's shirt at 20 paces. Wayne holsters the gun and removes the belt, handing it back to Ford. "Thank you, Glenn." Ford takes the belt with newfound respect. "Duke." Aye. I think I understand what you're saying." Wayne nods. "Speed is impressive, Glenn, but accuracy is deadly, and character is what determines whether that deadliness serves justice or feeds chaos." The reception continues around them, but the dynamic has permanently shifted. Ford no longer demonstrates his quick draw for the remainder of the evening. Instead, he finds Wayne an hour later, and they really talk about the responsibility that comes with portraying gunfighters on screen. Every time a kid watches one of our westerns, Wayne tells him quietly, they're learning something about right and wrong, about when violence is justified and when it's not, about the difference between a hero and a killer. That's a hell of a responsibility, Glenn. More important than any fast draw competition. Ford listens with the attention of a student, and something fundamental shifts in his understanding of their craft. Before you move on, understand what just happened here. Glenn Ford came to this evening with a measurable, quantifiable skill that he'd perfected through years of dedicated practice. He could demonstrate his speed with a stopwatch. He could prove his technical superiority, and John Wayne, in 3 minutes of conversation and one deliberately slow demonstration, showed him that he'd been measuring the wrong thing. Years later, Ford will tell interviewers about this night. "I was proud of how fast I could draw a gun," he'll say. "Duke showed me that the question isn't how fast you can draw. The question is whether you should draw at all." The 1964 Western Heritage Awards ceremony becomes legendary among industry insiders, not because of the awards presented, but because of the lesson taught. Two accomplished actors demonstrated two different approaches to their craft. Ford showed technical proficiency. Wayne showed moral authority. Glenn Ford continues to practice fast draw after this night, but he changes his approach to Western roles. His later performances emphasize character development over action sequences. He credits Wayne with teaching him that the most important battle a gunfighter faces isn't against another gun. It's against his own temptation to use power without wisdom. John Wayne's impromptu demonstration at the Paramount Commissary becomes part of Hollywood legend, not because of his speed. He was measurably slower than Ford, but because of what his performance represented: control over technique, substance over style, principle over prowess. The lesson Wayne taught that night extends far beyond gunfights or Western movies. It's about the difference between having power and knowing how to use it responsibly. Ford had perfected a skill. Wayne had mastered a philosophy. In a business built on image and performance, Wayne consistently demonstrated that authenticity matters more than technique, that moral authority trumps technical ability, that character, not capability, is what separates heroes from mere gunfighters. 3 months after the Western Heritage Awards, Ford is cast in a new Western. During the first gunfight scene, the director calls for a quick draw sequence. Ford executes it perfectly in 0.38 seconds, his fastest time yet. But when he watches the dailies, he asks the director to reshoot it. "Make it slower," Ford says, "and let me hold the aim longer. I want the audience to see why I'm drawing, not just how fast I can do it." The director looks confused, but Ford just smiles. "Something the Duke taught me." That's the thing about real lessons. They don't just change what you do, they change how you think about why you do it. Wayne never publicly discusses the demonstration at the Western Heritage Awards. When asked about it in interviews, he deflects with characteristic modesty. "Glenn's a fine actor and a good man," he'll say. "We just had different philosophies about gunfighting, that's all." But the people who were in that room remember. They remember the silence after Wayne spoke. They remember the look on Ford's face when he realized that speed without wisdom is just movement. They remember the deliberate slowness of Wayne's draw and the rock-steady aim that made speed irrelevant. And they remember the lesson. The gun doesn't make the man. The man makes the gun either a tool of justice or an instrument of chaos, and the difference between those two things isn't measured in fractions of a second. It's measured in the character of the person holding it. Look back at this story one more time, because there's a question it raises that's bigger than Hollywood or westerns or gunfights. How often do we perfect a technique while missing the purpose? How often do we measure ourselves by speed or efficiency while ignoring whether we're pointed at the right target? Ford spent 8 years learning to draw faster. Wayne spent 35 years learning when to draw at all. One is a skill you can time with a stopwatch. The other is wisdom you carry in your bones. If you enjoyed spending this time here, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing. A simple like also helps more than you'd think. The 1964 Western Heritage Awards ceremony ended around midnight. Glenn Ford left wearing his gun belt, but thinking about something heavier, the weight of responsibility that John Wayne carried like it was part of his skeleton. Ford would wear guns in a dozen more westerns over the next 20 years, but he never again talked about his draw speed. Instead, he talked about the characters he played and what they stood for. And if you want to hear what happened the night Wayne faced down a studio boss who tried to cut a scene because it made the hero look too vulnerable, tell me in the comments, because that's a whole different lesson about strength and what it really means to be a man.